Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County live webinar, Leading with a Growth Mindset. I'm Steve Smith, a webinar coordinator and also a business mentor here at SCORE in Fairfield County, and I'll be your host. And today our presenter is Joyce Schroeder. I'll tell you more about Joyce in just a minute, but first I'm going to just tell you a little bit about SCORE. Some of you have heard this before, so you'll just have to bear with me, but for the next minute or two. So SCORE is an organization that was set up in the mid-'60s as a part of the U.S. government Small Business Administration. Currently there are 320 some odd offices with over 10,000 volunteers around the country. We're one of those practices in Fairfield County, which basically means Bridgeport down to Greenwich, and not up to Danbury or Ridgefield. In Fairfield County SCORE, we have about 125 plus volunteers with various degrees of expertise in industry matter, business processes, subject matter experts like technology and supply chain, things of that nature. And we do really three primary value-added services to the small business community. Probably one of our main ones, not probably, but for sure one of our main ones is the workshop and webinar program, and that's what you're doing today. Our workshops are generally held at venues, usually libraries throughout Fairfield County. We do about 150 of those per year, and you can find the list of upcoming workshops at our website, which you're going to hear me mention many times, fairfieldcounty.score.org, which is probably where you signed into this webinar in the first place. So webinars, yes, we do 2 per month, almost always on Tuesday, almost always at noon, although we do recently we've made an exception and are starting to run an early evening webinar. So again, go to fairfieldcounty.score.org and you'll see the listing of our webinars, both in the future and, importantly, the ones we have run over the last year and a half. So there's quite a bit in the library, and it's very easy to get there. If you go to the website, you just click through to the webinar archives. Our primary value-add service actually is one-on-one counseling and mentoring, which we do at our offices at 111 East Avenue in Norwalk. 95% of them are done at that location. And that's really your ability to meet one-on-one with a counselor, or maybe in some cases 2 counselors, where they can really dive deeply into the issue or issues that are facing you in your business. It can be anything from, hey, how do I get started, to, hey, how do I sell my business, and everything in between. The other thing we have, which actually is kind of understated and underknown about, is the website itself. Inside that website is a tremendous amount of information, frequently asked questions by small businesses, and just tips and techniques about how to answer, how to read financial statements, everything you can possibly imagine. So I would encourage you, go to the webinar, and then from there choose workshops, webinars, frequently asked questions, or sign up for one-on-one counseling. So our next webinar is, you could probably figure this out, 2 weeks from today, and the subject is An Expert's Guide to Marketing on Facebook. Our speaker will be, actually there are 2 speakers, Jeff Seaver and John Dupree. And you'll be getting the usual email reminders. You've already gotten one, I believe, and you'll be getting 2 more. One the day before the webinar, which of course will be the 21st. There's another, I should have mentioned before, but probably our most powerful workshop series is called Simple Steps. It's Simple Steps to Starting a Business. It's 5 steps that you should take, and it's 5 different workshops. The next series, and again, you'll see all the details on the website, but the next series starts May 21st at Building One Community in Stamford. Go to Fairfieldcounty.score.org fairfieldcounty.score.org to get the details. Okay, so on to today's webinar. As you guys know, we end these sharply at 1 o'clock because your time is extremely valuable. And again, this is being recorded, and the slides will be available probably by the end of the day, by tomorrow for sure. At where? Yep, fairfieldcounty.score.org. So we also have time set aside for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So you'll notice on your window the chat room in the bottom left. Please log your questions down there. I will moderate those questions, and when we get to the end of Joyce's presentation, we'll kind of sort through them in the manner that makes the most sense, to me, actually. So at the conclusion of the webinar, you'll be receiving an email from SCORE asking you to evaluate the quality of the webinar, and we really appreciate your input. I personally read all of them. Now, on to our speaker. Joyce Schroeder is president of Flourishing Culture Consultants. She's an organizational culture and leadership consultant. She's worked in the field for over 20 years, helping large and small organizations transform the way they work. She's a frequent guest speaker, most recently at the Edison Strategic Issues Seminar in April of 2014, and at the 2012 and 15 Earlham School of Religion Leadership Conferences. She's recently completed her first book, Inwardly Focused, Outwardly Effective Leadership. That sounds fascinating, actually. And she may say one or two things about herself when she gets started here, but I'm going to shut up and turn it over to Joyce. And Joyce, good luck, and we'll be talking at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Steve, and thank you, Budley, and thanks to SCORE of Fairfield County for giving me this opportunity to present to you on a topic that is really important to me. I'm going to share with you a body of research done by a woman named Carol Dweck in Mindset, and I know that book really changed my life, and I just am always grateful for an opportunity to talk about her work and to share it with you as small business owners as you're considering the many things that you are doing to try to grow your business and make it a sustainable business. So just a little bit about myself. Steve told you that I've been working as an organizational change consultant over the past 20 years. My career started with a boutique consulting firm called Culture Change Consultants, where we applied the principles of organizational development and culture to safety, trying to create safer workplaces by having a safe, positive culture. I started this business 2.5 years ago because I felt that the lessons that I had learned in helping large industrial organizations change the way they work could be applied in all organizational settings. And so that's a little bit about me. Let's move on to the content. So I want to start off by sharing with you a case study about a small business that implied a growth mindset. 20 years ago, I was the first hire of a solopreneur who worked in organizational culture and leadership. I mean, we were so small, I worked in the basement of his house, and I watched firsthand how the company grew. A big part of our success was the owner had a growth mindset. He hired smart people, and he gave them the opportunity to flourish and grow. And so what did he do? Well, he encouraged people to think about better ways of operating and improving the product. An example of this was during the Great Recession in 2008. He brought us all in, all-day meeting, and he said to us, I want to thrive in this economy, not just survive. What should we be doing? And we brainstormed, and we came up with ideas that he went for, he adopted, and we actually were able to thrive during that very difficult time. Another thing that he would do is he would view mistakes as opportunities to grow. So when there were problems, we just were able to take the time to work through, okay, this is a problem. What do we need to learn? What do we need to be doing differently? So we solved problems jointly. And then finally, if someone showed an interest or exhibited a strength that would benefit the business, he or she was given the opportunity to develop that capability, which often included educational support. And an example of this is what he did with me. I mean, that's me in the middle of the picture in the black dress. I said to him early on that I wanted to become a consultant. So he paid for my master's. It was a big financial commitment, but he quickly made his money back with the work I did in the field. I had the opportunity to make more of a contribution to the growth of the company, but more importantly, it resulted in me being extremely loyal to him. And I stayed there for 20 years, and I really helped him make that transition to a very vibrant, high-flourishing culture and business. Over the 20 years that I was there, we quadrupled our earnings, and people don't leave the small firm. I was there for 20 years. I think the next group of people have been there for 16 years. The shortest tenure is this young woman who joined us right out of college, and she's been there for 7 years. But, because he employed a growth mindset, we had 20 years of continued growth, and there was a very high retention rate. So you might be thinking, okay, well, that sounds good, but it sounds hard. And I get it. I'm a new business owner too, and I'm sure you, like me, are juggling a lot. And you're learning a lot. You have a lot on your plate. You're writing business plans. You're developing organizational systems. You're learning how to market your product, to determine those distribution channels, navigating social media. There's a lot going on. And what I want to share with you today, again, is this body of research done by Carol Dweck in Mindset. And our topic is leading with a growth mindset. And what it's all about is the mindset with which you approach the things you do, your tasks, can affect your ability to grow and to adapt to the many challenges you face as you grow your business. And often, it's not doing different things. It's doing things differently. So, here are the topics that we'll be covering today. I'm going to talk about leaders being shapers of culture. In sharing Carol Dweck's work, I'm going to talk about how you can either have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, and how mindset, the mindset you adopt, has a profound impact on what and how you do. I'll share with you another case study, and this is one about Microsoft, and then we'll end with me sharing with you some tips to help you grow, help you create a growth mindset culture. So let's get started. So if we were in a live room together, and I would ask you to define organizational culture, we would probably find that there are as many definitions as there are people in the room. I've been working in this field of organizational culture for 20 years, and I have found that the definition of culture has morphed into being about everything. And if culture is about everything, how do you know what to work on? I see organizational culture as distinct from the other ways that we manage our business. And because it is distinct, it can be isolated and it can be addressed. So the thought leader and the thought leader that I follow, the one that I really draw upon when I talk about culture and the work that I do, is a gentleman named Edgar Schein. And Edgar Schein was a pioneer in the field of organizational culture and leadership. He was the first person to be writing about it back in the 1970s. And he wrote extensively about how organizational cultures are formed. He put forth the notion that leaders and culture are flip sides of the same coin, that leaders create the culture of an organization when they create the business, when they determine what the product is, how we're going to make the product and who's going to do the work. And the culture is largely influenced by their assumptions and beliefs and values. Now, this work is then passed down to the work group to implement. And as they learn through their successes and their failures, they learn ways of working that are considered to be valid enough that are then passed down to new people who join the organization as the way we do things around here. So organizational culture starts with leadership, and it evolves as people grow and learn about what it takes to produce the product. And you as owners own the culture of your organization. You're shapers of culture. So what you say and do speaks volumes as to what is important. Now, I want to talk a little bit about one of my pet peeves, and that is that we tend to use the terms manager and leaders interchangeably. And when I say we, I mean me. I do the same thing. And they are definitely not the same thing. There are different skill sets associated with each role. So what's the distinction? Well, simply put, managers manage things and leaders lead people. And as a new owner, you're asked to assume each of those roles. So let's take them one by one. So managers managing things. These are the activities that are associated with the running of your business. To me, it's like your to-do list to get the product out the door. You're dealing with details, you're creating plans, you're budgeting, you're organizing, you're staffing, you're directing and controlling and solving problems. So as an owner of the business, you're wearing this manager hat. But you also wear a leader hat, and leaders lead people. This is when you need advanced people skills. So when you're leading people, you're driving change. You're making the case that this is where we need to go and this is how we're going to get there. You create a vision of where you want the company to be. You inspire, you align, and you motivate people to get on board, to follow you. And you take the time to nurture and coach the people who work for you. And as a leader, you understand that you get a better product when you gather the input from others. So you take the time to solicit the input from the people who work for you. And these are all really important skills when you're talking about creating an organization that learns. So if you want to create a culture with a growth mindset, it's not something you put on your to-do list. It really starts with you as the shaper of culture, changing yourself first. And so what's that all about? Well, as a leader, you need to do that work of looking in the mirror and asking yourself, am I comfortable having smart people work for me? Do I take the time to solicit the input of my staff? Do I find opportunities to mentor? Do I feel like it's my job to be doing that? Do you model that it's okay to make mistakes? And do you view mistakes as opportunities to grow? My question to you, is this how you operate right now? Or is this a stretch? And if it's a stretch, is it possible to change? Well, we all know that change is hard. And that's why I like to share case studies of someone who did that. And a great example is Jack Welch. We all know about Jack Welch. He's considered to be one of the most widely admired, studied, and imitated CEOs of his time. But the leader he ended up being was not the leader he started out being. Apparently, earlier in his career, he was considered for a promotion, and a cautionary memo was put into his file saying he was arrogant, that he couldn't take criticism, and he depended too much on who he was and his talent instead of really working hard and working with his staff. This began the process of him starting to change. He recounts in his books that there were many times where he got knocked down. And rather than, complaining about what was happening to him, he took these as wake-up calls, and he decided that he needed to change. And again, it gets back to what we were talking about, mindset. The mindset with which he approached these tasks, these setbacks, really affected his ability to grow and to adapt to the challenges that he faced. And through these experiences, it taught him the kind of manager he wanted to be. He writes that he got the job as CEO because he pitched that he had the capacity to grow. And if you read his autobiography, he's mindful to say that his success wasn't because of me, it was because of we. And that's a big shift for someone, to transition from someone who thought it was all about him, who was arrogant, to going to a place where we had to work together to get where we wanted to be as an organization. So looking in the mirror, it's hard work, and we can get very stuck in habitual ways of being. So we look to neuroscience to help us understand why we get stuck. So we now understand through the work done by neuroscientists that the brain is malleable, that it changes as a result of experience. The understanding about how the brain works is that the brain learns through forming new circuits and strengthening or weakening existing ones. So one of the axioms in the field of neuroscience is that neurons that fire together wire together, and that's known as Hebb's law. What this law is getting at is repeated mental activity involves repeated neural activity, and that repeated neural activity actually changes the neural structure and function of your brain. So when we learn something, when we experience something, it takes over a portion of our mind map, and it controls that region. And each time we think it and experience it, it claims more control of the brain map. So this helps us understand how we can form habitual ways of thinking and being, because it becomes part of our brain's hardwiring, our circuitry. The not so good news is you can never get rid of these habitual ways of thinking and being. That said, there is good news that instead of getting rid of an old habit, you can form a new one, and you form it through intentional activities. Small, positive actions done every day add up to large changes over time as you gradually build up new neurological structures. So Hebb's law helped us understand how what we think and experience becomes part of our brain maps. We now also have an understanding that what drives what we do is our assumptions and beliefs. And again, thinking about Hebb's law, these assumptions and beliefs are based on real experiences. So I want to just share with you a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy. And the acronym for that, for ABC, is activating event, belief, and consequence. So up until about the middle of the 20th century, the thought was that the way the brain processed information was stimulus response, A to C, activating event, consequence. But with increased understanding of how the brain works and research done by psychologists, we now understand that our brain largely works ABC. There's an activating event. We interpret it based on our assumptions and beliefs, and what drives what we do, the action, is those assumptions and beliefs. Now, are there times in our life where we act AC? Yes, absolutely. I mean, if there was a fire, we would all know to run and try to get safe. But we largely do operate ABC. And how we know that's true is if you think about what's happening in our society today. We are very polarized. We're seeing the exact same thing, but we're interpreting it differently. And we interpret it differently because we have different assumptions and beliefs about the way the world works. So I've shared with you about leaders shaping culture. We talked about our brains and how we can get stuck in habitual ways of being and thinking. And now I want to transition to Carol Dweck's work in the field of mindset. And she's really written quite a wonderful book. I recommend easy read, picking it up, because I do think it'll have a profound impact on how you show up in the world. What prompted her research in the field of mindset is she wanted to understand why, given the same set of circumstances, some people keep on trying while others give up. And what she determined was that the difference was the mindset that people adopted. So let me share with you a little bit of the kind of research that she did to come to this conclusion. This is one of my favorite studies that I read about. So what she did was she took two groups of children, and they were given puzzles to do. And once they finished one puzzle, they were given a harder puzzle and successively harder puzzles. So the children were separated into two rooms. They met one-on-one with a researcher, and they were given their puzzles. Half of the children got people praise, and people praise is praising a fixed trait. Oh, you're so smart. Oh, you're a whiz. Oh, you're a genius. And so as they finished the puzzles and moved on to the more difficult ones, that's the kind of feedback they got. The other half of the children got process praise, and process praise is you're praising the effort that it takes to do the task. So they would hear things such as, I'm really impressed by how hard you're working, or I can tell you're really being very thoughtful before you place that piece into the puzzle. Or the researcher might have said, tell me, what's the thought process in your, putting these puzzles together? So as the puzzles got more difficult, both groups were struggling. So the researchers then asked the kids, well, what kind of puzzle do you want to work on next? An easy puzzle or a more challenging one? The kids that got people praise, the kids that were told you're such a genius, you're a whiz, you're a natural, those children chose the easy puzzle. Whereas the kids that got process praise, I can tell how hard you're working, they wanted to take on the challenge of a more difficult puzzle. So why did those kids choose an easier puzzle? Well, they already had a notion of themselves that they were smart, and this notion was being reinforced by the researcher. They didn't want to take on a harder puzzle because they might fail, and that would show that they weren't smart. So they made the safe choice. As compared to the kids who were getting positive recognition for exerting effort, they were taking on the challenge. So based on studies such as that, Carol Dweck came up with the notion that we have two types of mindset. We have a fixed mindset and we have a growth mindset. When you have a fixed mindset, you believe that your characteristics are fixed, like those kids thought they were smart. So it's what you're born with. These are abilities that just show up on their own. But you can also have a growth mindset. And the growth mindset recognizes that, the brain is malleable, that I can engage in intentional activities and I can get better at what I am doing, that my brain changes as a result of experiences. So with a fixed mindset, you believe you're either talented or smart or gifted as a business person, and you don't need to exert effort. The belief is that effort is for those who don't have these inherent abilities. whereas the growth mindset is about stretching yourself. That effort ignites your ability and turns it into accomplishment. And the mindset you adopt profoundly affects the way you lead your life, the way you will lead your business. Now, one more thing about mindset is none of us has an all-fixed mindset and an all-growth mindset. And it's sort of interesting, it's interesting to me, to find, to determine how am I showing up when I'm faced with something. If a task comes up, do I approach it with a fixed mindset that, I just am who I am, I'm not going to be able to handle this, or do I approach it as a growth mindset, as an opportunity that if I exert effort, I can get better at what I'm doing? I think about plumbing. I will never be a plumber. I'm as fixed as I can be in that mindset. But I have a growth mindset about the work I do, that if I work hard, if I read more, if I practice more, if I'm out in the field doing more work, I can get better and better at what I do. So I invite you to be mindful as to when you're like asked to do something, what mindset emerges for you. So I want to just talk about how a mindset can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this sort of brings together many of the things that we've been talking about so far, that it's our assumptions and beliefs that drive our behavior, merging that with Carol Dweck's research on fixed mindset and growth mindset. So it starts with a belief. It's our assumptions and beliefs that drive what we do. If I have a belief that I have all the answers, that I am smart, what does that drive me to do? Well, the behavior is that I don't ask for input. And what's the outcome of not asking for input? Well, then the business is all about me. This as compared to a growth mindset, where you start from a belief that I have a team of passionate go-getters, and if that's your belief, that drives you to ask for input, feedback, challenge these folks, and based on that behavior, the outcome is you have a culture of engagement, of ownership, and of teamwork. And I invite you, what kind of culture do you want to have in your organizations? But I understand we have some questions.
Yeah, Joyce, I have a question on just what you were talking about. I thought maybe I'd throw this in before you get into the Microsoft case study, because I was thinking about this as you were talking. The growth mindset, the team. Okay, so my thought was, can the team, and how, if the answer is yes, how does the team extend beyond the people that are under your direct, that are in your company? Specifically, I was thinking about customers on the one side or suppliers on the other, because if you really want to establish your growth in terms of revenue, market share, whatever your measurements are for growth, you need the customers and the suppliers to be on the team with you. Has there been any thought given to that, especially on the customer end? Because I think a lot of our folks, probably their product is something they control fairly well, but the people that come in here, getting and holding on to customers is a big challenge. And so what do you think? What do you think about that, if anything?
Right. Yeah, and again, I know that firsthand. Getting and holding on to customers is a big challenge. Obviously, you can control your team. So if you adopt a growth mindset, you can make it the way you work, and the people who work for you will be in that kind of culture. And the problem, from what I'm hearing you say, how do you then extend that growth mindset to customers? And, I really believe that, when we talk about leaders as shapers of culture, how do you show up? How do you, it affects all parts of the way you work. So the growth mindset would be one that you would employ with the people outside of your community. And my sense is that people would probably find it to be very refreshing, because I think that it's it's a better way to look at business. It's a better way to collaborate because you're coming in with a mindset that, let's think together to solve this problem. How can I help you? Maybe you would spend more time listening rather than talking because you were aware that you didn't have all the answers. And I think that people would respond very positively to that because oftentimes that's not an approach that someone takes.
So specifically when you were talking there, what I was thinking about was, so let's say you're making inexpensive jewelry. This is a real live example of a client of mine, actually. And you're working with several different types of retail formats, some big, some small, to retail your product. In some cases, there's the sales aren't meeting expectations. And so what this person did was took some of the ideas that looked like they were working in customer set A, took them to customer set B and said, do you think we could sell more if we did this, or maybe we displayed them differently, or we, as opposed to putting them at point of sale, we put them over here in this department, something like that, which is to get them to kind of buy into the problem a little bit and then buy into the solution.
Yeah, I think that that's a great example, because you're going to people and you're asking them to collaborate with you, to be part of the solution. You're not coming in and telling them what they need to do. You're asking for their input, and I think that's a great illustration. Yeah, absolutely. I like it a lot.
Well, thank you. I'll turn it back to you to get to the Microsoft.
Okay, thanks for those questions, Steve. So let's keep on going. So I want to share with you the Microsoft case study. As I was doing this research, I came across this case study. I really hadn't heard about it, and when I share it with people, they're not that familiar with it too. So I hope that you find it to be of value and to help illustrate where we're going with this about leading with a growth mindset. So what I read about Microsoft is that prior to 2000, they were known as a cool place to work. They were cutting edge, and their goal was to change the world. But in 2000, that all changed. They had fallen flat in every arena that they entered: e-books, social media, and music. And what was the problem? Well, there were technical problems. I mean, they needed to build everything off of the Windows platform, which made it difficult for them to respond quickly. But there were also cultural problems. Prior to 2000, a lot of people came to Microsoft because they heard it was a place to get rich. And then there was the dot-com crash, and that strained relationships between the old guard, people who had been there for a while, and these new folks. And that affected teamwork and collaboration. Another thing that was happening is that because of this age gap, ideas that were submitted by 20-somethings were quickly dismissed by the people who were veterans, who had been there for a while, those folks in their 40s and their 50s. People also began to realize that they weren't making the money they thought, and that the only way they could make money was through promotions. And that led to there being more managers, more bureaucracy, and because there was more bureaucracy, it took longer to make things and to affect change. If you read this article that I reference on the slide, How Microsoft Lost Its Mojo, you would read that they characterized their culture as one of internal antagonism and warfare. So a lot of people were jumping ship, and product development lagged, and morale plummeted. So in 2014, there was a change in leadership, and Satya Nadella became the CEO of Microsoft. And when he came in, he said that we have a culture that crippled innovation. And if you're in the IT world, you need to be innovators, but they were anything but. Now, one of the big problems was that they had a performance management system that pitted employees against each other. They had this ranking system that people were slotted into top, good, average, below average, and poor, and there had to be a forced distribution, which meant that 1 in 10 people would always receive a poor rating. So what was happening was employees prioritized, what would get them the highest ratings rather than the quality of the product that they were producing. And again, this system really killed collaboration. When Nardelli took over, it was a company fading towards irrelevance. 4 years later, in 2018, Nardelli celebrated his 4th anniversary as the CEO of Microsoft. And under his stewardship, Microsoft went from a company that was perceived to be a lumbering giant to one that got its coolness back. And it again became a magnet for top engineering talent. It was a world-class competitor among the heavyweights of the tech industry, and their company share price soared to an all-time high. And how did he effect this change? Well, he knew he had to change the culture, and the culture was about the people. What Nadella said is Microsoft adopted the belief that everyone can grow and develop, potential is nurtured, not predetermined, and anyone can change their mindset. So he adopted Carol Dweck's work in the field of mindset and said that he knew that in order to change the way Microsoft operated was they needed to create a culture of a growth mindset. So he sent a letter to everyone reminding them about the company's core values, that it was about innovation, and their core value was that they wanted to empower users and organizations to be able to do more. He acknowledged that the culture had become rigid, that each person had to prove that he or she was the smartest person in the room. So hierarchy and pecking order took control, and spontaneity and creativity suffered. The first year, he spent it just listening and learning, and he heard from the people that he talked to that we have to get back to we want to change the world. And to get there, we needed to change the company. So he developed a roadmap to remove the paralysis. And it started by embracing the work of Carol Dweck in a growth mindset. He surrounded himself with the smartest people. He solicited their ideas. He removed obstacles so it was easier for people to work. And he made it okay for people to take risks, to make mistakes, because that's how you grow. And he modeled the desired behaviors. He tells a great story about how he modeled, how he did this modeling. And he was at a women's conference, and he made a statement that was perceived to be derogatory about the gender gap in pay. And rather than, say he misunderstood the question, deflect blame, he owned it. And he said, you know what, that was a mistake. And that made me realize that I need to learn. I have more to learn. And when a CEO admits a mistake like that, he wasn't quite sure what the outcome was. But he writes that it paid off in spades. Because again, as the shaper of culture, organizational leaders shape the culture, they own the culture, what they say and do speaks volumes. He showed that it was okay to make mistakes. And when you realize it's okay to make mistakes, you're really getting to that place where it's more about growth than covering what we're doing and staying stuck. So, I shared with you what culture is. I shared with you that leaders own the culture, that we can get stuck in habitual ways of being. We talked about mindset, that you can have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And I shared with you 2 case studies where the organizational leaders created a growth mindset culture. and they were truly able to reap the benefits from making that transition. So I wanted to share with you some tips for your consideration if you are of the mind that I need to transition to more of a growth mindset culture. And the first tip is getting back to leaders looking in the mirror. You need to change yourself first. You know, our actions spring from our beliefs. So when you truly believe that it's good to be surrounded by smart people, it's good to have the best people I can around me, that will drive your behaviors and make you more open to soliciting their input and getting them to be part of the solution in your organization. You need to also own your mistakes, like Satya Nadella did. He owned his mistakes, he owned his deficiencies, and he used them as opportunities to grow. You need to surround yourself with the best people that you can find, and you need to give them a platform to be part of the change, you know, soliciting their input, making them part of the solution. When you have those folks that have identified themselves as, you know, setting themselves apart from the pack, and you see that they have potential, finding the opportunities to develop their capabilities. And then one thing that Satya Nadella did was he made it a practice that at the end of every meeting, they would ask the question, was that a growth mindset meeting or a fixed mindset meeting? And then asking why. You know, just having that as part of the way you do business keeps it on your radar and keeps it top of mind for everyone, that this is where we want to be as an organization, as a culture. We want to be at a place of growth rather than being at a place where we're fixed. So I feel like I've been talking a lot, and let's open it up to questions.
Okay, Joyce, thank you very, very much for that. And, well, that's the whole thing about a webinar. You do most of the talking. But so let me, I have another question for you. You know, knowing the SCORE clients, a lot of them are sole proprietors, or maybe they've got 2 or 3 or 4 people, kind of like the company that you started when you were working in the basement. And I've just, again, having dealt with them for a lot of these small businesses for years, it's there's a propensity of a person who has kind of like come up with an idea and started their own business to be what I call a self-integrator, which means I'm going to do it all myself. And you know, you hear people say, I'm the only one that can really do it the way I want it to be done. That sounds like fixed mindset, or worse to me. Or they say, listen, I can do it faster if I just do it rather than explaining to Joyce what I want done, and then that sounds like fixed mindset to me. So I guess my hypothesis here is that there's, for small business, you know, innovative entrepreneurs, small business people, it's even more difficult, I think, that to have a growth mindset than a fixed mindset. So what do you say to these people who I call self-integrators? And they're not bad people. They're not trying to do anything bad. They just kind of really believe that, hey, it's my idea. I can do it faster. And to get them to think outside the box and become a growth mindset person.
Right. Well, you know, as you were asking that question, I was nodding a lot. And I was nodding a lot because I was thinking about myself now having my own business. And I'm doing those very things that you're saying, you know, and I'm mindful of the fact that in doing it, I am employing a fixed mindset. And it's something that I'm actually working on, you know, because I get into a place, well, I really know what it is I'm doing and what I have to offer, and sometimes I'm not open to what other people have to say. And again, that's why this research is so important to me, because I have to catch myself and say, but no, let me be open to what other people have to say. I don't have all the answers. So it's, I think, something that I know I have to continually be mindful of. So I invite people who might be in that mindset of, you know, I know what I'm doing, to be, to challenge themselves, because I think it really is something you have to catch yourself in the moment and say, okay, me talking to myself, Joyce, really, I think you have to listen to what this person has to say. That's one thing. I think also, again, I'm working on a fixed budget. There's a hesitancy to want to hire people to do some of the mundane tasks. And that, again, that's really hard, because I am probably like many of your people working within a limited budget. But the times that I have brought people in have been so beneficial, because they have freed me up to be doing the more important things. And it's something that I think it's baby steps. You have to try it. And if it works, I think then you have a success, and then you have to think, okay, well, how do I do that again? How do I do that again? And I think over time, because I often feel like when I talked about that case study in the beginning about the small business, I was the only person who worked for this man for 4 years. And I had to talk him into hiring the next person. It was a big stretch for him. But I said to him, I thought that opened up the space for more growth by bringing in people. And it really proved to be the case.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. The words that you use here, or not you use, but people use, growth mindset, fixed mindset. I think of revenue when I hear those words, and I hear about growing and a business and stuff like that. And it's like if you're a 1 or 2 person business and you're reluctant to what I call delegate and reward, or test people by offering them to do something maybe they're not even comfortable with, what it does is it frees up time for you, the innovator, to work harder and work on the high value added tasks as opposed. And if you want to grow, it seems to me if you're a small business person and you want to grow your business and you keep a fixed mindset, you don't have a chance, or your chances are very, very slim, because there's only how many hours can you have to sleep, 7 or 8. So how many hours are there left? So I found this topic to be very applicable to our clients, that actually, as it relates to asking people to help and do things and be a part of the solution and to grow the business. So that's what I was thinking.
As you were talking, and something that I've learned over the years is people want to help, and being open to that I don't have all the answers and that I need to reach out to other people has really proven to be a good thing to do, because at the end of the day, people do want to help, and you have to put yourself in those situations to be open to hearing what people have to say.
Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, other than my very difficult ones, which I've started to challenge her a little bit here, then we'll go ahead and close this down. I'll give you a chance if anybody wants to lob one in here at the last minute while I make my closing comments. So we are going to have another webinar, again, of course, as I said many times, on 5/21, and the topic is, who wants to tell me? No, okay, I'm just kidding. The Expert's Guide to Marketing on Facebook. There's a lot of key words in that, like expert, marketing, Facebook, so I'm going to be there. Of course, I have no choice. Also, I encourage you to go to our website, and again, that's where you can request a mentor. That's the signing up for one-on-one counseling. You can see our schedule of workshops and webinars, and sign up for those. And you'll also find just an incredible amount of intellectual capital on starting and running a small business. So for all of you, those that attended today, thank you very, very much, and a big thanks to Joyce Schroeder for presenting. And just one more time out there, guys, visit fairfieldcounty.score.org. Have a nice day, and we'll listen to you next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Please stand by.